Good morning.
Good morning.
Welcome, everyone. Since President McCreary will be introducing Dr. Goatley, our keynote speaker, I simply want to take this opportunity to thank Dr. Goatley for coming all the way from Duke University to speak to us, and to thank the three panelists who will be enriching our discussion today, as well as Dr. Terry Smith, our moderator. I would also like to give a special appreciation to all those of you who have traveled from afar to be here today. Students from our St. John's campus, that over there. So, and members of Haiti Mission at the New Jersey Korean Presbyterian Church. So over here. And also the, some I'll say the pastors, the Reverend Kim. In important ways, this year's event is a fitting follow-up to last year's inaugural Underwood Lecture, which was given by Dr. Lorena Martel and missionaries from India, Africa, and Japan. It is also very meaningful that this second annual Underwood Lecture and Symposium has been made a part of the Founders Day event. I believe it was above our mission spirit that founded New Brunswick Theological Seminary all those many years ago, and that produced such mission-minded graduates as Joe Emmer, Scudder, James Cantin, and Avir, and of course, Horace G. Underwood, after whom our Center for Global Christianity is named, as well as this lecture series. Underwood was an extraordinary missionary, and I want to stress that in celebrating his legacy, we are not only, or even primarily, celebrating the success of his mission in a particular country or region of the world. That was a remarkable page in the history of Christian missions. But even more than that, his approach exemplifies for us today a new model and spirit of mission that I believe will lead to innovative thinking in the life of missions to come, now and throughout the 21st century, toward truly local community and everywhere. In the back page of your brochure, you will find some information about the Center for Global Christianity. I ask and pray for your continuous support for the center and for the future of global Christianity, that the Christ-founded community at NBTS, which include all of you, will continue to thrive in service to God and the community. Thank you very much. Now I ask Dr. McCreary to come forward and introduce the keynote speaker as well as the other dignitaries. Thank you.
Good morning. Good morning. I would like to welcome you as you have just been welcomed by Dr. James Jinhung Kim. I do want to also say that he is the new chair of the Horace Underwood, so that not just the director, but he is now an endowed chair. So let's give God a praise for that. I do want to just lift up the fact that yesterday we were 234 years old. And so, we are the oldest Protestant seminary in the United States of America. So I want to say that. And one of the wonderful things when Dr. Livingston began New Brunswick in New York, there with the students, and then was invited to become the 4th president of Rutgers, he came at a time when Rutgers was in quite a bit of trouble and literally saved Rutgers, resurrected it, as well as bringing New Brunswick here and then establishing us on this side of the street. And so it's a great legacy, a great history. For those who don't know it, I invite you to spend some time with our new library director. Would he stand? Dr. Milas, and so he's there. I want to start, I'm going to come back to faculty, but I want to start by any alumni who are here today. Would you stand all over the room? Anyone who's an alumni of New Brunswick? Amen. Thank you. Welcome home. Any current students of New Brunswick, would you stand? And any current students, certificate, doctorate program? Amen. Good to have you. Welcome. We wish you nothing but God's blessings. Now, any staff members that are here, current staff members, would you all stand? That we can see you. Amen. All right, praise God. And all right, so staff and faculty, we thank God for that. They're here as well. I've been working for the last couple of years on the model, and what we came up with so far is this, and I just want to just let you all hear it and think on it with us. New Brunswick Theological Seminary, educating people and calling communities to think critically, act justly, and love expansively. And so that'll be good. And you can see those key words there are to think, act, and love. And so that may be coming out soon. I'm thinking it's about ready for mass distribution, but we're working on it as well. We are also honored today, I have to say that the Reformed Church in America is our root, our foundation, our essence. There's so much to know about what it means to be a Presbyterian in the sense of church order, where Baptist, you all know, is governance, and Catholic, Episcopal, where bishops in charge. Well, the way we run it is kind of where there are ministers of word and sacrament, there are elders, and there are deacons, and together they kind of run things. Well, the General Secretary of the RCA has visited with us. And that's a big deal, all right? So I would like for him to stand. Eddie Alamán, he is here. He just began. I'm actually on the job longer than he is, so I like that, you know. So I've been president now for 1 year and 3 months. He's been general secretary for 3 months. So I got him by 1 year. And I'm just excited about the work we're going to do together to really just advance God's kingdom and God's kingdom on earth. It is my pleasure. I stand to do this, and it's a joy to introduce people who are important. It's a pleasure to introduce people that do a good job at what they're called to do. But it's even more of a pleasure to do that when it's a friend. And you can see his bio if you get a chance to go to Duke University, the Duke Divinity School. You can see there the work that he's doing. Lott Carey Foreign Missions website, the work that he's doing. And all of that is awesome. My vice president of academic affairs and dean is from Kentucky, and so I want you to see Beth. And this is David. When you get a chance, he's from Kentucky, and I don't know what that means, but that's where he's from, and I'll leave that there. But as I've gotten to know David Goatley, the Reverend Dr. David Goatley, one of the things that I've learned about him is that he's a man who recognizes talent. And everyone can't do that. No one who are just able to look at where people are and say, this is the person here, God has gifted you to do this or to do that. And it's been a pleasure to know that about him. He's also a revolutionary person against injustice. And I've seen him be calm, cool, and collected until there's an injustice. And then I've seen that, you'll see how tall he is when he gets up here, just go off about some things. He's also a person who can help you realize vision and to really be a person who understands and sees into the future. We call it a sense of agency, where you know that this can be actualized. He's that kind of a person. He's also a realistic administrator. I've watched him handle a budget when there wasn't little money to be handled, and to be able to distribute it over 11 different partners worldwide in a wonderful way. And then I see him as a radical thinker, as someone who can actually take a text or an idea and do something creative and innovative with it in ways that brings new understanding. You know, sometimes when a prophet speaks, you become uncomfortable. And so I want to ask you now to be okay with being uncomfortable. The Reverend Dr. David Goatley.
Well, good morning. Good morning. Thank you, President McCrary, for your generosity, and it's good to have friends who know you, who will do you no harm. I'm also grateful to be present today with Pastor Gregory Jackson, who's the chairman of the Board of Trustees of this seminary, and he also is the recently inducted president of the Lott Carey Foreign Mission Society, and just I think Monday maybe got back from a short-term mission assignment to South Africa. So he hit the ground running and is in preparation for leading a team to Australia in February of pastors who will be working with Aboriginal pastoral leaders. So we're grateful for his presence and partnership. I'm also thankful for the large number of friends who I know from the Lott Carey experience in this part of the world who are here, and I want to say thank you for being here and for your partnership across these years. It's good to be with the General Secretary, and I'm on a project with the General Secretary of the World Communion of Reformed Churches, Chris Ferguson. And so we'll be together, where will the next one be? Perhaps in Thailand in a few months. And so I've come to grow with much more gratitude and appreciation, not only the conversations. I think my first visit here was 12 years or so, and to see how things are progressing and how you're adapting. And I'm thankful for being in this wonderful place to do theological imagination. Place is important, and so I'm grateful to be here today. So for the next few moments, I want to invite you to think about liberating missions. The assumption or the organizing thought around this presentation is that Lott Carey, which is the long formal name is Lott Carey Baptist Foreign Mission Society, but Lott Carey has been exclusively a supporting missions agency for more than 4 decades. Prior to this, we had a hybrid approach of both sending U.S. missionaries and supporting indigenous missionaries. And we have included the supporting strategy for over 70 years. And so our contemporary model is informed by liberation theologies, and it employs leadership strategies that invest in and draws upon indigenous capacities. So that's the beginning inclination of what our talk is today. And so I hope that we will be provoked to think afresh about what it means to experience liberating missions so that we can do liberating missions. So along the way, I hope that you will embrace what I'm talking about. It is not uncommon for me to receive inquiries about why there are so few African American international, or in the parlance of some, cross-cultural missionaries. I normally receive this question from white American evangelicals. Last year, I received an email request from a scholar who is trying to catalog African Americans who are serving as, in his word, field missionaries outside the United States. He wrote about having predominantly white mission societies that regularly contact him to help identify black candidates to deploy. I explained that Lott Carey is a supporting agency. We invest in indigenously led ministries of evangelism, compassion, empowerment, and advocacy. Irrespective of what I described, he tried to persuade me to use my platform as the chief executive of a robust black church network to recruit black missionaries for possible candidacy in white sending societies. A missionary, in his mind, is someone deployed, quote, to the field, end quote, in another country for a minimum term of 2 years, being sent to another country by an agency or by financial resources from friends or one's own income was his only model for missionary service. Occasionally, I receive the same question from black ministers or students of missions who have been or who are being trained by white evangelicals. I recall 2 black doctoral candidates studying at different white evangelical schools contacting me independently with the same question. Quote, "Why are there so few black missionaries?" End quote. They defined missionaries as people who are living and serving full-time in another country with primary support from a U.S. sending agency or individual financial partners. I probed their normative, even exclusive concept of missions and proceeded to challenge whether restricting their definition was appropriate. They had never encountered an alternative to their paradigm. And this was from students who were doing a doctor of philosophy and another a doctor of missiology. I wanted to help them think about their assumptions and their questions. A problematic question, however, a problematic question, after all, is likely to yield a problematic answer. Prior to our conversation, the model described by the scholar I first referenced was their only conceptual framework for understanding missions. My response to the question about why there are, quote, so few black missionaries, end quote, is to ask, what makes you draw that conclusion? I ask this question because I think the assumptions that undergird the assertion that there are allegedly so few black missionaries, those assumptions are problematic. First, the assumed definition of a missionary in the question is troublesome. People sometimes conclude that there are allegedly so few black missionaries because of how they define what a missionary is. Some who draw the aforementioned conclusion exclusively or primarily categorize a missionary as someone who is on a full-time cross-cultural vocational assignment. In this case, being a missionary is the work one does or the job one holds. People sometimes refer to career missionaries who are employed in the missions industry. Why is the full-time vocational cross-cultural missionary model normative for Christians? Although many full-time vocational cross-cultural missionaries serve faithfully and honorably, this paradigm is normative or exclusive, is linked to an Enlightenment concept of missions, which is bound up, among other things, in concepts of manifest destiny and colonialism. A word about missions and cultural hegemony. The superiority of Western culture over non-Western cultures has historically been an explicit underpinning of the Western missionary enterprise. This concept assumes that God has ordained and uniquely gifted Western nations to advance the kingdom throughout the world, or as President McCrary says, or queendom. These assumptions have informed biblical interpretation to understand Western cultures to be chosen by God and destined to carry Christianity to unsaved people globally. This notion was further connected to millennial expectations about steering history toward its end. This Anglo-Saxon and continental Protestant notion took special form in the development of the Americas. Their involvement in the New World with new expansions and enthusiasm for new conquests, figuratively and literally, further fueled the concept of deploying missionaries cross-culturally to bring their blend of culture and Christianity to non-Western and non-Christian lands. Mission and colonialism were historically linked since the 16th century. Given the meshing of the state and the church in Europe, conquered people were forced to submit to the victorious ruler and religion as Western powers expanded to non-Western territories. There was no differentiation between politics and theology. In contrast to colonizing expressions where the Pope granted the kings of Portugal and Spain separate areas of conquered lands in the Middle Ages, commercial interests drove the conquest of non-Western people in the Enlightenment era. While missionaries were often forbidden to accompany merchants during their colonizing efforts because of perceived threats to commercial interests during this period, things changed in the 19th century. Territorial expansion and mission linked during this era and played an effective role in colonization. The result: Western Christianity, Western commerce, Western civilization. David Bosch tells us, from the point of view of the colonial government, the missionaries were indeed ideal allies. They lived among the local people, knew their language, and understood their customs. Who was better equipped than these missionaries to persuade unwilling, quote, natives, end quote, to submit to the Pax Britannica or Pax Teutonica? What better agents of this cultural, political, and economic influence could a Western government hope to have than missionaries? Manifest destiny and colonialism are key pillars of the white American evangelical mission paradigm. The resultant model of mission has embedded within it seeds of imperialism and racism. For example, while the Roman Empire and medieval Europe practiced slavery, Race was not a factor. Beginning in the 16th century, however, the Pope authorized the opening of a slave market in Lisbon, where up to 12,000 Africans were sold annually for transportation to the West Indies. By the 18th century, Britain had the lion's share of the slave market. Colonialism has had devastating impact on non-Western people. There have, paradoxically, been many positive developments, however, in various parts of the world due to the missionary enterprise. Schools, healthcare, agricultural development, and more have contributed to advances in many parts of the world because of missionaries. Some Dalit people in India, for example, argue that life for them was better under British colonization, which included missionary presence, than in independence, which became inhospitable to Western missionaries. This is asserted because higher caste Indians abused, and they continue to abuse, Dalits and denied, and they continue to deny, resources to them, especially Christian Dalits, in ways that the British colonizers never did. While the Brahmin caste, for example, were freed from British exploitation upon their independence in 1947, they have ruthlessly oppressed Dalit people and denied resources and opportunities for security and dignity. The Indian activist Gandhi is no hero to them. I just want to say here that to be in settings where Dalit liberationists were doing that kind of critique around Mohandas Gandhi was a paradigm challenge for those of us who know how important Gandhi was in the thought of Martin King. And to have Dalit liberationists to say he's no friend to us was an interesting and challenging insight. There are many quality of life improvements, and there are many people who have come to follow Jesus through full-time, vocational, cross-cultural missionaries. However, there have also been horrendous outcomes in places where colonizers, with the support of missionaries and their agencies, have ruled. Natural resources have been extracted, land has been confiscated, and indigenous people have suffered from genocide or enslavement. A common sentiment exists in many Southern African contexts that the missionaries gave us the Bible and took our land. Mission around the world is complicated. On one side of the coin is benevolence. On the other side of the coin, however, is malevolence. Devastating consequences of the missionary enterprise cannot be overlooked. They must be noted, they must be acknowledged, there must be repentance. The tendencies for the worst side of the mission enterprise born from the Enlightenment and modern eras cannot be assumed to be finished in the postmodern era. Yet, mission need not, indeed must not, be abandoned or destroyed. Good work has been done. Lives have been saved. The quality of life, in some ways for many, has been improved. Good and faithful witness to the risen Christ has been done. However, mission has also often been bound by cultural superiority and economic exploitation. Mission must be liberated from its complicity with European hegemony and white cultural supremacy. Our task today is liberating mission from its life-threatening and death-dealing tendencies of the past so that liberating mission can be done in the world. Connecting mission theology with liberation theologies is one important step along this journey. Now about liberation theology and mission. Where one sits determines what one sees. This emphasis on how context shapes consciousness is critical for liberating missions in order for us to participate in liberating missions. I was severely chastised in graduate school, so don't worry about it if you get hurt here. Once for asking whether a privileged male European scholar could articulate, as he claimed he could, a non-contextual, non-denominational, non-continental theology with universal applicability. My question was twofold. First, could that be done? Second, if it could be done, could it be done by a privileged, white, male, European, academic theologian? It seemed to me a rather privileged perch from which to craft a theology suitable for the entire world. To assert that one has the capacity to articulate theology in a way that is not formed and probably limited by context is a tall order. This is not to say that people are bound by their social locations without possibility of redemption. After all, Wendell Clay Somerville asserted that both Jesus and Paul were born, lived, and died Jews, but their Jewishness did not limit their understanding of and commitment to God's will for the world. It is, however, to say that we must take seriously the ground which gives rise to our understanding, interpreting, and communicating something of the things of God. Liberation theology, as articulated in academic circles, originated in Latin America, where the pervasiveness of abject poverty was, in the words of Gustavo Gutierrez, the most serious social issue of the continent, and also the greatest challenge to the announcement of the gospel and, in consequence, to reflection about the Christian faith. It paid critical attention to the realities of poverty, its complexities, its causes, its consequences, and strategies to ensure that people enjoyed their right to life. The question we face then, he says, is how to find a way to talk about God as love to people who are suffering from poverty and oppression. How are we to tell the poor that they are daughters and sons of God? What words are we to use to proclaim the God of life to men and women who die unjustly? Liberation theology argues that in order to speak of God, one must first contemplate God's love and then put into practice the commandment to love our neighbors. Together, worship and commitment to others comprise the first act, praxis. After and only after praxis are we able to theologize. This is the second act, the reflection on praxis in the light of the Word of God. Liberation theology is not the domain of the professional theologians. It is done by popular, pastoral, and professional theologians. Popular theology is done by the people at the community level, which is primarily oral, but can also be done in gestures and symbols. I'm reminded here of some time ago demonstrations where people would say, I can't breathe, or hands up, don't shoot. That's popular theology. Their experiences are real, and their lived faith is essential to the enterprise. Pastoral theology, done by priests, pastors, and ministerially trained professors, and might I add, seminary students, sheds the light of the saving word on the reality of injustice so as to inspire the church to struggle for liberation. Further, the liberation theology of Gustavo Gutierrez, according to the boss, is substantially the same as that of a Christian laborer in northeastern Brazil. The basic content is the same. The sap that feeds the branches of the tree is the same sap that passes through the trunk and rises from the hidden roots underground. You will note that I stated earlier that liberation theology, as articulated in academic circles, originated in Latin America. While the formal theological world notes the genesis in this place and at this time, Lott Carey was experiencing liberation theology in Liberia earlier than that. And not Lott Carey alone, but in many places where people were working with struggling and dispossessed people. The Reverend A. Wesley Knott was the superintendent of Lott Carey Mission School in Liberia 1956 to 64. He asserted that without compromising the gospel, mission societies would need to deploy staff that could contribute to the forward movement of Africa in all ways. Missionary teachers with the ability to negotiate between the so-called secular and the religious spheres would be required. The personnel for which Knott called needed to be able to address questions about whether people might be saved in more than one way. Could one be spiritually saved while tolerating and supporting oppressive economic and social conditions? Knott was expressing the core convictions that would distinguish the discipline of liberation theology that gained global recognition with the 1971 English language publication of A Theology of Liberation, History, Politics, and Salvation by the Peruvian theologian and priest Gustavo Gutierrez. Knott contended the new missionary must not lose his or her distinctive sense of vocation, but he or she must combine with passion Paul's universal and versatility, universalism and versatility, and become all things to all people. He called for a comprehensive approach to preparing young people for the future, as opposed to a narrow academic strategy. Generations before many missional and national leaders understood, Knott realized that a country cannot thrive with those who excel in academics alone. He recognized, I realized the significance of me being in this seminary and surrounded by Rutgers University, but I agree with Knott. He recognized that technical and service workers had value, contribute to society, and desired to be respected by the school and the society. Beyond a high-quality academic education, Knott envisioned training that would equip artisans and domestic workers, as well as people who pursue professions demanding higher education. Hence, he called for added resources to support training for office workers and hospitality employees, as well as planning for doctors, lawyers, and the business elite. Not connected or understood the relationship between poverty and oppression, education and self-determination, and politics and theology. He was doing pastoral liberation theology and working to support the conscientization of those he served, while seeking to leverage his connection with a global partner to join poor people in Liberia in the struggle to exercise their agency and help people to experience their human right of the right to life. a commitment to liberation theology, a theology that grows from the context of oppressed people, helps to liberate mission from its hegemonic tendencies to impose the cultural and conceptual will of the strong on the weak, of the wealthy class on the impoverished class, and of the sending agencies on the host partners. In addition to liberation theology's contribution to our task of liberating missions, so that we can do liberating missions, is the need to promote leadership strategies that respect indigenous cultures. Western conversations about leadership often emphasize vision casting and charisma. How often have you heard leaders talk about casting their personal vision? Even in church contexts, we often celebrate the extroverted, high-energy, overachieving leader who shatters boundaries and breaks barriers. Sounds like Superman. The effective leader is the one credited with doubling the budget and tripling the membership and commands thousands of social media hits. Effectiveness is evaluated quantitatively. Entrepreneur, author, and speaker Brian Tracy asserts the 7 attributes of great leaders and executives to be vision, courage, integrity, humility, strategic planning, focus, and cooperation. He cites exemplars such as Jack Welch of GE, Winston Churchill, Zig Ziglar, and Honeywell's Larry Bossidy, and more. He further asserts another important trait that the best leaders strive to perfect is the ability to speak effectively and persuasively. One wonders what Paul would say. While Tracy is not a missions guy, his Western capitalistic focus on making more money is in the air that many Christian leaders breathe in the global North. Leadership strategies connected to liberation theologies, however, assert that leadership contributes to or facilitates the success of a community on journey. Community on journey is an important concept to embrace concerning missional engagement. Our partnership is not for projects. Our partnership is about people. We must never forget the people. Even the leader is integrally part of the people. The leader is not, quote, the sage on the stage, end quote. The leader is not the star performer. And while perusing church websites may not make it clear, the leader is not the main attraction of a church community. As some people describe the African philosophical concept of Ubuntu as, I am because we are, a powerful image of the idea is accredited to Archbishop Desmond Tutu upon his enthronement in Cape Town, where he said, we are bound up together in the bundle of life. Liberating missions that enable liberating missions requires nurturing indigenous leaders. The idea is not to produce leaders in global contexts that replicate the often toxicity embedded in Western corporate leadership models. We need to invest in developing leaders in ways that respect the context in which they serve. To respect context, however, does not suggest uncritical affirmation of whatever leaders are found in whatever places they serve. I'd like to point out here the difference between, in South Africa, the leader of the ANC, Jacob Zuma, and the disaster of his leadership compared to Nelson Mandela. To respect context means to take seriously the cultural dynamics that give life and breath to local settings. While some things may need to be critiqued, Zuma, other things need to be cultivated and celebrated, like Mandela. For example, I'm thinking of a South African pastor who is an amazing leader that helps communities served to live more into good and faithful Christian witness. After observing his effectiveness across some years, I began to have conversations about what makes a good leader in that context. Only then did I come to learn about his role as the elder in his clan. While he was not the oldest, the role of clan elder had been conferred upon him by other older leaders. Although he seemed to have natural and cultivated skills, his work in negotiating conflicts within his extended family group further developed his listening, summarizing, synthesizing, negotiating, and reconciling skills. By his own admission, being a cultural leader helped him to develop into a better church leader and missional leader. Liberating missions requires leadership that facilitates a community in a pilgrimage of faith to realize God's will for their lives. This approach attends similarly to liberation theology, to the people in community. Rather than imposing outside leadership capabilities and commitments on the host community, Lott Carey seeks to come alongside indigenously led communities. This is born out of respect for host communities and contributes to the sustainability of missional partnerships. Finally, to talk about Lott Carey as a liberating paradigm for missions. The Lott Carey Baptist Foreign Missions Society is a global missions community that helps churches extend the Christian witness throughout the world. We are born of African American Baptist heritage, and that serves to inform rather than restrain us. Our relationships and partnerships around the world include people of various ethnic backgrounds, diverse Christian traditions, and I should add, and different religious communities. As a global supporting missions agency, we come alongside indigenous communities and leaders to provide prayer partnership, financial support, and technical assistance to advance expressions of evangelism, compassion, empowerment, and advocacy. We are committed to the priority of missions and to partnerships for missions. These characteristics have been consistent in the organization from its founding, and while our strategies and emphases adapt for relevance and effectiveness, the core of our identity has remained constant. Barring some compelling call to change, I suspect that we will stay on this path going forward. Across the years, we have enjoyed global partnerships in nearly 36 countries. While the original focus in 1897 was for missions in Africa with intentionality and integrity, missional partnerships were established in Haiti in 1916. We supported Russian pastors beginning in 1924, and we engaged in Christian social ministries in India by 1936. Within 40 years of our founding, and I note this is going through World War I and the Great Depression, Lott Carey was engaging in partnerships in Africa, Europe, the Caribbean, and Haiti. Given the historic racism of this era, this global vision for mission is impressive. One of the key liberation, theological, and leadership development strategies characteristic of the Lott Carey experience has been our focus on being a supporting agency, a supporting missions agency. Originally, we deployed U.S. citizens to lead partnerships in Liberia and Haiti. By 1924, however, we were supporting pastors in Russia. This was an effort to support the indigenous leadership in that country and to demonstrate solidarity with Russian Christians. By 1936, we began supporting the ministry of a social worker in Calcutta. We brought home our last U.S. citizen from Haiti in 1974. Since that time, we have been exclusively a supporting agency, with all missions personnel outside the U.S. being non-U.S. citizens. There have been times, for example, when citizens of Sierra Leone and Haiti served in Liberia, but we have avoided exporting U.S. citizens for anything other than short-term missions assignments for more than 4 decades. Lott Carey's commitment to being a supporting agency in no way denigrates the work of sending agencies. Our emphasis, however, is that people in the village have the solutions to their own problems. The problem, however, is often they do not have all the resources needed to address their pressing concerns. Privileging indigenous people and investing in indigenous leadership is one indication that we are committed to liberating missions so that we can participate in liberating missions. Thank you.
Let's go that way.
Oh, this way.
Yep.
Yeah.
Good morning. Good morning. My task is somewhat simple. I am Dr. Terry Smith. I am the Associate Dean of Assessment and Assistant Professor of Biblical Studies here at New Brunswick Theological Seminary. And in continuing with the discussion on liberating missions for a 21st century model, we will have a panel discussion. And so at this time, I'd like to introduce our panelists, Dr. David Goatley, who you have already been introduced to. Dr. Jacqueline E. Madison McQuarrie, who is the pastor of First Baptist Church in Piscataway. And the wife of the president. Dr. I got ready to say Gregory Jerome Jackson, who is the pastor of Mount Olive Baptist Church in Hackensack. And then Dr. Angelita Clifton, who is the associate minister at Fountain Baptist Church. All of these persons sit in some form as part of the Lott Carey leadership team. And so we would like to engage them in a discussion around Lott Carey and its involvement with global missions and their specific ministries. And so the way the discussion will sort of run is that we'll give each panelist 2 to 3 minutes to just talk about their mission, their ministry, and how it connects with Lott Carey. And then we will open it up for discussion. And we will start with Dr. Clifton.
Good morning, everyone. Good morning. As stated, I am an associate minister at Fountain Baptist Church in Summit, New Jersey, and my pastor is the Reverend Dr. J. Michael Sanders, who I am sure most of you are familiar with. I started participating in Lott Carey in about 2003. When I first joined Fountain in 2000, went on my first mission experience with Lott Carey in 2003. Got there and was blown away because how did I not know about this great organization? How did my whole life I not hear a word about it? And so I was immediately compelled to begin participating and working in it. So when I decided to go to seminary, I decided that I would do my supervised ministry with Lott Carey, and at that time I began to work on the anti-trafficking initiative. It is an initiative where we use to help educate the membership church bodies about trafficking in their own context and also abroad. And so I'm one of 3 facilitators that travels around different states, and we touch base with membership to let them know about what's going on in their context, as well as to help them see it in a much clearer kind of a way. And so I've been blessed to be doing that for a long time, and one of the things that keeps me focused on that and doesn't let me deter from it is because of where I sit and what I see. And so I'm always compelled to continue working on that.
Good morning. I'm Greg Jackson from Mount Olive Church in Hackensack and president of Lott Carey at this present time. I started out not really an advocate of global missions as a young pastor. I was called to Mount Olive Church in 1984, and at that time they had a mission Sunday, and Mrs. Alice Somerville was the speaker when I arrived there in 1984 or so, and she was the wife of Dr. Wendell Somerville, who was the executive secretary treasurer of Lott Carey at that time. At that time, she was probably about 85 or so. She was an older lady, and I was 33 years old. She was the speaker of the Mission Sunday. She came and she said, "Y'all let that boy come to Lott Carey." And she said, "If you'll let him come, I will pay." She did. Because at the time, my church was really not all that mission-minded. Trying to get them to give $500 a year was like a major undertaking. And so they let me go, and she paid for me to go down to Louisville, Kentucky, where Lott Carey was meeting at that time. Since that time, I think I've missed 1 year of the convention, and that's when I had surgery. And so at the time, I was very much of a social gospel liberationist, kind of person in the country, social justice kind of pastor, and have learned over those years, in my own humble opinion, that mission is a logical extension of social justice. We do social justice not just around the corner, but we do social justice around the world. So that's kind of my journey, and since then, the other thing too I think was very important in my own development was my first missions trip. And my first mission trip was to South Africa, but as much as it was important where I went, it was who I went with. I went with Dr. Jerry Sanders, I went with Dr. Clifford Jones, and I went with Dr. John Fuller. All of them, and I was really the neophyte in the group, all of them were already very established pastors, wonderful congregations, giving thousands of dollars to global missions, and I was struggling to give $1,000. We were struggling to give $1,000, but somehow the Lord fixed it so I could be in that group. What a wonderful 10 days to transform my life. What I saw, what I experienced, and what I heard from these colleagues in ministry.
Testing. Testing. Is it on? Oh, okay. Again, my name is Jacqueline Madison McQuarrie, and I have been a pastor for, I was introduced to the Lott Carey experience in missions as a pastor, I was serving in Richmond, Virginia, there was a program sponsored by Lott Carey called the Pastoral Excellence Program that was funded through the Lilly Endowment, and it took pastors on mission immersion experiences internationally, and with over 3 years. And there were pastors from the United States in which we came together and then traveled to, we went to Guyana, South America, Jamaica, and South Africa. And what we did was walked alongside of the pastors in those areas. We lived in their homes, so we learned the culture. We went to where they went. They took us to meet their members. They took us to nursing homes and other facilities where they did ministry. And so we actually we were able to learn from them as we were experiencing ministry and thinking about how we do things in our own context. And so it was an amazing experience as a pastor to do that, because we also built networks with other pastors around the United States, because for many of you know, as pastors, it's a lonely place sometimes. You don't have colleagues who you can talk to talk about what you've done. And so spending 3 years with this cohort group enhanced relationships as well that really serve to empower us in ministry in some powerful ways. And so for me, in participating in that as a pastor, one of the things, several things that it did by traveling to other places is it begins to help you, for me, see the globalness of Christianity. Brothers and sisters all over the world. So one of the things after coming back, whenever I take or serve communion on Sundays, I literally see myself supping with believers all over the world, not just in the community. It expands our sense of community as brothers and sisters in Christ. And it also challenges the aspect of social justice in ways that when you see things outside of your own context and how things are in other places in the world, you see some of the privilege that we have. Well, let me put it in my personalized. I saw some of the privileges that I had in the United States, which I found to be both troubling as well as, I guess, comforting in the sense that, so just seeing different things. And as you begin to walk alongside pastors and see their ministry, you see what is important. And so when coming back to the States to do ministry in that context, invited another way of understanding that missions and service is really about spreading the love of Jesus Christ. And some of the things that we focus on and buildings and other things at the end of the day don't matter as much. So it really expanded my sense of consciousness about what ministry and social justice and service is about.
My name's David Goatley. I spent 22 years as Lott Carey's executive.
22 years. 22. You know, I'm a strong supporter of Lott Carey. For those who know me, I cannot talk enough about this organization, and I have been sort of with them. It says 26 years, but I actually came in when Dr. Goatley became the executive treasurer, that long title that he has. So it's been 22 years of working and serving with them. And Lott Carey has as one of their tenets a focus on advocacy. And so I want to open up the first question by asking a question to the panelists, and feel free, either of you, to address the question is, how should we as individuals and as the church consider the global exploitation of men, women, and children as a missional imperative? Why should we do that?
Well, for myself, I would say, one, because it is a mandate from God, and it was the mission of Jesus Christ, that we set the captives free and that we help to liberate people. That is our mission, so that's why it should be important to us. As Dr. Goatley stated about liberating missions so that we can do liberating missions, I think one of the things that we need to understand is how important it is to serve as a voice for the people, not to come in and present ourselves in such a way that we believe we have all the answers. Let the people speak for themselves and then help them, provide them with the resources that they need to be able to do the things that they need. So we need to have a clear understanding of what missions is about, what it means to do real mission work. And when you understand it in its proper fashion, then and only then can you really do what needs to be done. So when I was working on my Master's of Divinity, I also was able to do a dual degree with my social work, MSW. And so it gave me a unique perspective of the gospel message from like the macro, the meso, and the micro. It let me see it at all three levels. And it just broadened my understanding in such a way. It allowed me to see where I sit in this thing, and then what my responsibility is. So why is it an imperative? I can speak for myself and say, because of where I sit, who I am, my history, my family, my background, my community. All of those things put it in the proper perspective for me to see and understand why it's important for that to be one of my primary concerns, advocating and empowering.
Thank you. It's open for questions. Any of the other panelists want to?
Yes, I'd like. I've always believed that African Americans doing mission on the continent of Africa and throughout the diaspora, we ought to bring something different to the table than our European brothers and other racial groups as we do missions in that context. We have so many similarities in terms of our own struggles in this nation, in terms of dealing with racism, dealing with poverty, dealing with suffering. Our own context is connected not only to people of Africa, but particularly in Africa due to the racism, etc., that our brothers and sisters experience there. And so, because of where we sit, because of where we sat, and because of where we sit today, and as we go around the world, we go because we're sent, but we also go with a certain kind of experience, dealing with certain issues that our ethnicity brings to the table, how we have responded. And as you go to South Africa, certainly in the South African struggle, as well as the African American struggle here, there's so many similarities. We borrow from each other. And we see, at least I see, myself and our own struggles in their struggles. And so we go with experience more than answers. And we sit beside and we listen to their pain, their struggle, and then we talk about our own similarities and where we can connect together and what we can learn from each other's experience. Just this week, I got back on Wednesday from South Africa, and I was down in Cape Town, and we went to St. George's Church, where Desmond Tutu had been the bishop. I forget who the bishop is now, and then across the street, even though I've been to Cape Town several times before, we went to the Slave Lodge. Never been there before. It's a museum, and walked in there, really not knowing what to expect. Cried like a baby. I cry like a baby, and so I'm really not a weeping prophet usually, but it just touched me in such a way that I figured that if I didn't cry, I'd blow my stack. I'd probably be cussing or something like that. So I felt probably it was best to cry, and so it was a wonderful experience, and I thought, boy, it would be great to go from here to Washington. to the museum, the African American Museum there, and connect the journey. Because we are really connected in this global struggle for liberation and for fairness and for fighting poverty and the isms around the world. Not just racism, sexism, and all these other isms. And now that I'm 67, I'm dealing with the ageism that I get out.
Yeah, one of the things, too, that for me, look at how advocacy also challenges my own thinking and comfort levels. And what I found that just stepping into an environment that I was not comfortable with really not only helped me be, I felt it helped me be a better Christian as well as a better pastor, because, you know, I don't like bugs and dirt and, you know, yeah, things like that. And so it's like, oh, you know, and you're going, not that every place I went you experienced it, but I knew that would be, you know, we were traveling on rivers and just a lot of stuff that was very different. And we have a way of maneuvering in our context here. We can avoid places that we're uncomfortable with. And so stepping out to do this internationally also helped me deal with some of my own idiosyncrasies and challenges. And as I did this in a different culture, it sensitized me to being over here. And this might sound like kind of a trivial example, but I was in another country and we were being served dinner, and as to be hospitable, you eat what is served to you. And there were ants all over the table. And see, if I saw an ant in my house over here, I'm calling the exterminator. I don't have to see 10 or 11. If I see one, let's call. They were all over the table. And in fact, they turned the plates down so they wouldn't crawl in the bowl before we ate. And when I poured my tea, I went to hot tea, there was an ant in my tea. And so I was like, oh my gosh, you know. And so I kind of scooped the ant out of the tea and put it somewhere, and I drank the tea. And then when I got back home to the United States, my aunt, who, God rest her soul, was developing Alzheimer's, and she would cook. And the food wasn't tasting like it used to because she was starting to forget to put things in. And I said, if I can eat an ant overseas, I can eat what my aunt has fixed here. Because at this point that you learn relational, what's important, and relationships and people are more important sometimes than what our idiosyncrasies are. And I've had some people say, well, it's so much to do here in the United States. I don't need to go out of the country, you know, to do missions. It's a lot of work to do here. And of course there is truth to that. Well, one of the things I've learned through the Lott Carey philosophy is when we go, by walking alongside, we go to find out what their needs are. Like when we traveled to Haiti to help build houses, the Haitian people were the engineers, and they told us what to do. We were laying concrete, and we were making rhubards, things that we have machines in the United States to do. I had blisters on my hand from cracking, because to make the cement, they just had larger rocks, and we had to crack them down to make them smaller to be able to stir into cement. And when you do that there, by understanding, and this is how it helped me, understanding that we're helping them. The same thing is when we come to the United States and we want to help people who are at risk and less fortunate, we often will do the same thing here. We decide what they need and do it. But it helped me because, again, how do we empower them to rise above and through the circumstances, and what does it mean to help them? And Dr. Goatley told a story once about, not to talk too long, that about the people, and you might have to jump in if I don't tell it right. At the end of, you heard it, at the end of the river, these folks were washing up to shore. They were beat up, and so the folks were pulling them out of the river, cleaning up their wounds and bandaging them up. And then later, you see more people fly out of the river. So the nice people were grabbing them, cleaning them up, drying them off, putting Band-Aids on their wounds. But then somebody decided one day, let's go upstream to figure out why are these wounded bodies to keep coming up on the shore. And what we often think about in missions is we just clean up what we see, but advocacy means somebody has to go upshore and figure out why they're being thrown in the river and wounded and hurt in the first place. And so that informed me with regard to advocacy, what that means. Do you want to add anything? I don't know if I told the story right.
I'm not adding to what the pastor said. I think for me is that the whole Exodus story is paradigmatic for Christianity, and setting captives free is paradigmatic for the Christian story and the Christian narrative. And if we're going to be Christian, then we have to be a part of that experience of helping people to be free and to live with security and with dignity.
And a part of being set free is also setting yourself free from your own prejudices, and your own myopic thinking, and your own paternalistic lifestyle of the American way.
We have a question here.
Hi, my name is Minister Brent Osborne. My church is Somerville Baptist Church in New Jersey. This is my first time being introduced and hearing about Lott mission. So my question would be to all the people on the panel: how invested have you been and are you in spreading this message to associations, because our church is in an association, to the associations, so that those people, all those churches that are in the association can be introduced to it. A speaker could come and speak to them to get them interested in coming and getting involved and doing what you do. Because I believe part of what my ministry may be that, but had I not come here, I don't know if I would have ever heard about who you are, because through our association, I've never heard anyone from your organization come out.
I'm so glad you asked that question. I am the president of Lott, Carey, and I pastor in Hackensack. What association are you in?
Christian Fellowship.
Christian Fellowship. Well, I've reached out to all. We're having a program on next Friday, as a matter of fact, where we're being commissioned as president of Lott, Carey. And so we do reach out to all of the moderators in the association, state presidents, General Baptist Convention, as well as United Baptist State Convention, and we'll do I guess we're not doing a good enough job, but we'll do a better job in terms of reaching out to local pastors and as well as moderators and associations and whatnot.
Yes.
Our president is on his way to the General Convention later on today, where he will see your moderator and say that you said you need to know.
Good morning. I'm Reverend Lauren Carrington. I'm Associate Minister at the Underwood Baptist Church here in New Brunswick. And
my question is, we've had you come speak at our missionary society a couple of years ago about the trafficking, and my question is, how do we do as our missionary society in the church, how do we do meaningful ministry? That's my question for our group in our church now is, like, we've had you come, we've learned about trafficking, and I think maybe a few people are still paying attention to it after that, but how do we do meaningful ministry? Not the ministry that, perpetuates the European model, but how do we help and do things in relationship to others?
So one of the things I would say would be most important is to just take a look around your community and see who's in the community, who the people are around you. And then once you begin to notice or recognize, particularly trafficking, what's happening in your particular community, it kind of adds a different dimension to it when you bring it to the people. So I think, I can't recall being there, but I'm sure that I was. And I know that, this is a passion for me and has been for a long time. Seeing it, as I stated, individually, communally, and from a society standpoint, it allows me to see how I play a role in all three areas, and it keeps me focused on it. And so I would really suggest trying to take a needs assessment of your community, see who the people are in your community who may be forced labor, who may have some other maybe survivors of human trafficking. See what's going on in your community. Young women are particularly struggling in high schools. Mm-hmm. That might be something, because there are mothers and they're concerned about their daughters. That might be a way to stimulate interest. And so I would just really suggest to you taking a clear assessment of what's going on in your community, finding out what your people are passionate about, and then making that connection for them.
May I also just suggest that Lott Carey publishes the Lott Carey Herald, a magazine, quarterly. And usually over these last few years, one of those magazines has been dedicated to the prayers of women around the world. If I would just like to, if I could recommend anything in terms of missionary groups in your church, it would be that magazine. It's published once a year. I think it's in the March issue. And it's not dated, it's like 30 days, so you could use the magazine anytime. Focusing, because one of the things I've learned about global missions, no matter how much money you have, if you had $100 trillion, it still wouldn't be enough to alleviate all of the poverty and all of the suffering around the world. So we go out under the anointing of the Holy Spirit, and we go out as prayer warriors to what we see around the world. So I would encourage your missionary group, your missionary society, get that magazine, use it for those 30 days, pray about the various issues around the world, and then beyond that, hopefully we're trying to move churches away from, I don't want to say maybe away from, but in addition to missionary society, we want to develop a missional pastor. If you want to figure out the temperature of the church, you put a thermometer in the pastor's mouth. You can have a missionary society in the church, but if the pastor's not missional, you got a problem. Mm-hmm. So we're trying to encourage pastors to become missionals, to have a heart for people around the world, to have compassion, and to love people, and to fight for social justice at home and around the world. That's what we shoot for.
And if I could just say one more thing. As the Vice President for the Women in Service Everywhere, I will be collecting names to have people participate in the 31 days of prayer. And so I'd love to see you after this is over.
Well, let me just make reference to what he was talking about, that at lottcarey.org, under resources, are a list of those magazines. So they're soft copies. So at lottcarey.org, under resources, there are those magazines for 3 or 4 years back. And so it's he's making reference to the prayer, the month of prayer. And so every March, so there will be for each year that March edition, and it's 31 days of prayer, and they're written by women from around the world. So it is a way of being led in prayer by women for empowerment of prayer in the voices of women from around the world. And so it is a part of conscientization, which is a part of the liberation theology paradigm, of raising your consciousness about what experiences are around the world. Also, if you look at the initiative called the Tamar Project on the same website, lottcarey.org, under the initiative of the Tamar Project, that there are two resources. One is a 12-week contextual Bible study about violence against women, and it's written by people in Southern and Eastern Africa. And there's also a kind of a primer about how to help your church start getting engaged in anti-trafficking. So there are some steps. She was talking about micro, meso, and macro. So there are some kind of steps of how do I get my church engaged. So those are some other resources that will be free, and they're on that website.
Baptist Church. I want to say ditto to what Dr. Goatley said, because that's exactly what I was going to say. As an area for resources for you to find out information, and also you as a person to understand what Lott Carey is all about. The website is a wealth of information to help you and your group work together.
I have a question here.
Marcella Christie from Fountain Baptist Church, and I just wanted to ask Dr. Goatley and the president of Lott Carey, and you know that Fountain is very involved with Lott Carey, and I have not been there the past 2 or 3 years, but I make my donations. I send money instead of traveling on the airplane to get there. But my question is, a couple of years ago, we had what was called the medical mission to Jamaica. And I know that Lott Carey has missions to Jamaica. So the doctors and nurses have been contacting me, wanting to know if we could get it started again. But money is kind of short, because the church was the one who sponsored us over those years, and I was able to get about $10,000 from the hospital in Summit Hospital, from a doctor who died and left funding for Africa, but they were kind enough to give me $10,000 towards our mission to Jamaica. So I'm wondering if, you know, we could be supported in that regard. It's really costly, because what we did then, we would get the medical supplies from here and ship it to Jamaica. And we also have to have the doctors licensed to be able to work in Jamaica. It's not like we just get up and can just go to their clinics to take care of people, because they're human beings. Sometimes we think we can send, you know, any old thing to these poor people, and that is okay. For me, it's not. So we you know, I would go through everything to make sure that whatever is going there is good enough for me, is good enough for the poor people, because I'm from Jamaica, as everybody will recognize my accent. They tell me I can't hear it. But so I just wondered if we could get some form of support. I know the church will support us, but, you know, just to see if we can get that back into, it's really needed. You know, I'm the ambulance driver when I go to Jamaica, because there's no ambulance to take a patient when our doctors see them and know that they need to get to the hospital. So I would have a car to take them there. So I just wanted to know.
Let me make a suggestion that, just for the sake of time, that if that is something that you really want to have some more discussions around, that we take that particular question, Dr. Goatley, to the Lott Carey folks later.
Okay, great. Thank you.
Back in the back.
I don't need mine. This is for. I just want to make a comment, actually, to Dr. McCleary. My name is Sharon Small. I'm a certificate student here, and I worship at Princeton Baptist Church as part of the American Baptist Association, and I hail from Georgetown, Guyana. So I want to thank you for the service of ministry to my country. But more than anything, I want to thank you for your posture in doing so, that of listening and coming alongside. Very often in ministry, we don't do enough of listening. We come from a position of imposition, and let me tell you how it's done. So that really resonated with me, and I want to express my appreciation and gratitude for that. And I hope to see more of that, and quite frankly, I hope to model that myself in my own ministry. Thank you.
I have another question. Is that okay if I ask another question? I am the moderator, right? I get to ask the question. Okay. Is it another? Oh, okay.
This is not a question, okay? It's a suggestion to all of us, especially to the school and especially on the center. Okay. Thank you very much, Dr. Goatley. I'm pretty much proved with your insights. The question like, why are there so few African-American international cross-cultural missionaries? So this my suggestion is, like the suggesting question is, why are there so few African-American Baptists here? You understand? No. All right. So the one word that the key word in this lecture is indigenous. So that means living, staying in the same town, same community. So like Jack Welch and Winston Churchill, I'm living with you, same town with you. Okay. But the, like, who is it? The Ziegler and Larry Bassidi, I don't know them. So I'm not living with you in the same town. That means indigenous. So suggestion is the maybe for the Underwood lecture for the next year annual lecture, maybe we need to be more global, we need to be more flexible, we need to be more inclusive. And that's the suggestion. I appreciate your insights and your discussions today. Yeah, thank you.
Thank you. Dr. Goatley, you did mention your question about so few black missionaries, and want to sort of tie this to what women do, women in their role. And so my question is, what contribution do female pastors and leaders make to the work of global missions? And what challenges must women still overcome in doing this kind of work? And then third, I know this is 3 questions. So the first one has to do with contributions. The second one has to do with challenges that women face. And then my third question is, what does the future look like for women in ministry and global missions?
Okay, you might have to help me remember the
contributions.
The contributions. Well, it's significant in terms of in terms of Baptist life, for example, and I suspect it is true across traditions, particularly in the last 100 years. A significant part of the mission enterprise has been led and financed by women. Mm-hmm. Now, because of the politics of denominational life, many women have not had positions of leadership. But, so for example, when you think about black Baptist life, for example, the most prominent missional figure is probably Nanny Helen Burroughs. Clearly, I mean, hands down. I don't even think people know a black missionary in black Baptist life who would come anywhere near that. So in terms of contributions, much of the work of missions has been done and has been financed by women, although the politics has been that without women's mission societies, then women have not had the leadership roles in many religious organizations, Protestant or Roman Catholic. And if you start talking about the Eastern Church, it's even worse. So part of it is the doing of it, and then the other part is the recognition of the doing, which is problematic. So I think that also in Lott Carey's experience, for almost 40 years, our work in Liberia was led by the way that the historical language is W.H. and Cora Pear Thomas. So that's William H. and Cora Pear Thomas. They were a couple. They went in 1908. I think he died in 43, and she came home in 46. And so they were the shapers of that. When you read really what's going on, it should read Cora and W.H. I mean, that's what, because she, the way it comes across, she is really the heartbeat of the educational missional model. But the politics of the time where the men always get first billing. And so some of that has to do with our recalibrating the way we do our language. So I think in terms of contributions, the record will show that whether it is local missions or national missions or international missions, you largely had women doing it. Even across denominations, you have a large number of single women who would do global missions. Because even if they felt a call to ministry leadership, they were not going to be placed as pastors in the U.S. So a number of them would end up doing missions and having maybe official roles as teachers or official roles as nurses, but they also were doing significant pastoral leadership role. So some of it is a reframing of our looking at it and taking off some of the paternalistic and patriarchal lenses. Contributions, challenges?
Challenges, but actually, since we do have a female pastor sitting here, as well as another female minister, maybe you all as females can address the challenge and the future, the question about the challenge and the future.
Well, I think one of the things that I've noticed, the same challenges we continue to strive through and work to overcome, and we need to continue to do it, because I found as we go into other cultures, part of it is we bring encouragement, and I think a ministry of presence, because if you look at the prayer journal, you'll see that women are objectified and often abused both emotionally and physically all over the world. To read that prayer guide that's put forth by many of the persons who live in those areas, you will find, it's almost distressing to see just how the violence that's perpetrated over so many. But in every place, God is amazing, and there are warriors on the battlefield, and both men and women partnered. But I think it's important as we continue as a pastor to go in and we encourage the hearts of other pastors, and we sit together and share together. So we'll want to continue that. And then from America, another piece that we are taught is that to have some cultural sensitivity, in that we were told, not to wear certain clothing, certain jewelry, because we didn't want to come into the countries and create problems for our sisters after we leave. But how can we sit with them, help to empower them, and slowly bring this help them deal with ways to slowly impart change, and we're there to support and encourage and advocate as we can.
And again, I think it goes back to what Dr. Goatley started out by saying, that we need to liberate the thinking in the churches so that we can actually do liberational work. And I think because women make up the majority of the Black Baptist Church, I can speak to that, is majority women, but there are very few women who are in leadership positions. And so when you see that, you recognize that that, in a way, is an exploitive kind of a mindset, because ultimately they are a means to an end, right? They make up the bulk, they have the bulk of the money, they have the bulk of the work, the bulk of the service, but they are the least likely seen. So I'm glad that you introduced that before I said anything about that. But here's the great thing. I am so excited and so just overwhelmed with the fact that we have a new president, and I know he's going to do great and wonderful things. But coming directly after him, we have the first female president for Lott Carey, Dr. Gina Stewart. And there is no other woman that I could even begin to imagine who is going to be able to help to shape the way women are thought of in a different way, in a different perspective. And so I'm so excited. So when I think about what's coming on the horizon, and I think about the Thriving and Striving, the program for the female pastors, and I just think about how all of that's going to mix together and how liberating and empowering and enlightening that's going to be. I think that all the challenges that you face are worth it when you see that. So when I see what Lott Carey is doing, and I look around and I see other organizations doing the same kind of thing, I am encouraged and I am enthusiastic about the future, because I truly believe that once they have a woman in place, they will never look around and say, is it time to have another woman? They'll be saying, where are they? We need them here, because they'll see exactly what we're able to do in terms of how we're able to mobilize, because, you know, the lens of patriarchy does tend to block the vision and not allow you to be able to see what women can do. And so I'm really grateful that I'm a part of Lott Carey, and that Lott Carey has opened up the door to basically set a precedent, be a trailblazer for other organizations to realize how important the role of women, how important it is to be a woman at this time, and how important the role of women would be in an organization. So when I think about the challenges, I think we're making great strides, and I'm grateful for that.
Thank you, thank you. I thought there was a question here. Yeah, but you want me to go to the, okay. This question is actually for Dr. Goatley. Could you say a little bit more in terms of how we're defining indigenous, and then talk about Lott Carey as a global missional organization?
Yes. When we're using the language of indigenous, we're talking about people who are the locally born and raised and leadership. So, for example, in Lott Carey, Indian leaders lead our Indian work. Haitian leaders lead the Haitian work. Zimbabwean leaders lead the Zimbabwean work. So for us, when we talk about indigenous leaders, we're talking about folks who are the residents, and not just have relocated there, but who have grown up in that context. And so that gives a different kind of understanding about both the spoken and unspoken rules of engagement and the like. So there are, for example, we sent someone to do a project, a guy, he was a part of a team to India, and he had done some international stuff, and I didn't think I had to do a certain kind of orientation. He came back with all of these pictures. So here he is, this big tall guy. He's taking a picture. Every picture where he is, he's got his arm around somebody's shoulder, male or female. I almost blew a gasket, because he should have known in that culture, as a man, you're not putting your hands on a woman. Like here, we're touchy-feely sometimes, and even now with the Me Too sensitivity, it raises, I'm serious, it raises a whole new dynamic, you know, about all of this hugging and stuff, right? And so I was with a couple of womanist ethicists, and they were naming that as terms as some of the problematic stuff. So the indigenous stuff is when you are raised up in a culture and in a community, and you're a leader there, then that is the kind of leader that we're trying to do. Lott Carey as a global community, we try, when I came in the late 90s, the model was more of like a hub and spokes. So everything had to come to the U.S. first, and then it would go out. Decisions and etc. What we tried to do is create a different kind of model of more like a web, so that there were folks, if something was going on in, for example, we did a project in Mozambique, and nobody from the U.S. ever went except after it was over to celebrate. So what we did is we worked with support from South Africa and Zimbabwe to support the Mozambican project, because in that region, they had the most insight. We've done projects where Liberians and Nigerians would support each other. In Guyana, for example, we send students for their theological training to the University of West Indies, the United Theological College in Jamaica, so that from Guyana they go to Jamaica for their graduate training, and then they come back, and what it does is it honors the regional strength. So it doesn't assume that the only place you can get quality theological education, forgive me, Brother President, not the one place you can get it is New Brunswick Theological Seminary, but it's not the only place. All right? Because there's value in terms of nurturing local leadership and regional leadership and investing in that. We've sent students from South Africa to Zimbabwe, and from South Africa and Zimbabwe to South Africa for further studies, and they enrich the experience both ways, and it honors and values, and then they don't have to say they have to come to the United States in order to get, that's the only place. Mm-hmm. And see, that's a part of the hegemony that we're talking about trying to liberate, not to say, for example, I was using the idea of a supporting versus a sending agency. So I would say at the end, I'm not denigrating sending agencies. Mm-hmm. What I'm saying is that it's problematic when that's the only valued model. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. So that you have to be a European or you have to be a North American in order to be a worthy missionary in another context. And while there are some hints of that changing now, we've been doing it a long time, and we want to encourage it and raise the conversation. So to be a global community means that we're trying to nurture indigenous capacities and regional connectivity so that there is a web of connections and that it's more dense in terms of the partnerships and the possibilities, and we can offer each other the kind of support that we need.
Thank you. Thank you. There was another question.
After listening to the opening and you saying the lack of blacks that are actually missionaries going, and me from my own experience, I went to a different conference and we met some people that said that they did missionary work, and all of the people that were around me all had those issues, almost like the pastor spoke about. So my question is, how do you guys work to get the fear out of the black people in the black church to get their minds changed to wanting to do missionary? As I said before, I believe that the Lord may be leading me into that in some capacity, but there are pastors around me that I've heard express the same type of, like, I ain't doing that, versus, okay, I understand why God is having me do that.
Great question. A couple of things. One is that in Lott Carey, we encourage short-term mission experiences as a part of your discipleship formation. So we're unapologetic about that. And we don't try to convince anybody that you ought to do it. We're not going to spend time I'm not going to spend time and energy trying to convince somebody who's already decided that they've lived with so much toxicity of privilege in the United States that they cannot be inconvenienced. So I'm not even dealing with that. What I want to do is find people who may be inclined in this direction and then work with them to give them some opportunities for that. And we do training. We help explain what people are going to do and where they're going to serve. Now, also, like Carey, admittedly, because we know we're dealing with pampered U.S. Christians, I mean, we know that. If you're dealing with people who don't even go camping with tents in the U.S., there's no sense in putting them somewhere, you know, where they're going to be on a dirt floor, on a mat. I mean, that'd be so traumatizing that the hosts have to spend too much time pampering and babying them and stuff like that. So we don't want to impose that on them. So we you know, you will not stay in a JW Marriott. You may stay in something more akin to a Motel 6 or in a home. But so that's a part of the way we try to set up is not to traumatize people, but we also try to challenge people about their privilege. Just because you got a credit card that the church pays for does not give you the privilege to say, I can't go unless I can stay in a resort. Now, I know some people who they stay exclusively. They'll go to the Dominican Republic and stay in a resort and then have somebody come pick them up and take them out to an underserved area, and they do it, and then so that they can come back and rejuvenate for the next day. As you can tell, I'm offended by that, because some of the places that the hosts have to come to get them, they couldn't afford to stay. It would take them 3 months' salary to stay one night, and when they drive up to get them, then the people stand there because they inhaled the toxicity of privilege, then they're looking at their own fellow citizens with some kind of disdain. And so you don't want to set yourself up like that. So in order, what we try to do is find people who if you want to go tour, go tour.
All right.
And I mean, and you might want to do tourism with a little mission on the side. That's fine. Just be honest and name it and say, we're going to stay in a resort, we're going to stay in our 5-star hotel, and we're going to do a project on the side and feel a little better about it. That's cool. If it's a short-term mission assignment, we think you need to live close with the people. Go on and be inconvenienced.
All right.
Walter Brueggemann, and I know we give him time, so this is my last piece. For our Hebrew Bible scholars, Walter Brueggemann's Theology of the Psalms, Spirituality of the Psalms, talks about the Psalms communicating seasons of orientation, disorientation, and new orientation. And that's kind of the pedagogical model that we use for short-term missions. We take people who are oriented and construct an opportunity to serve in some disorienting experience and help lead them to a new orientation so that what they've learned and what they've experienced, whether it's in a house with the aunt or whether it's in visiting a museum around a slave culture or going to Robben Island, or whether it's working with women. You're getting ready to go to Nigeria to do work with women who are impoverished. Those are carefully constructed so that we coach people up before they get there, and then we have them accompanied by hosts. And then when we come back, we try to keep the community going so that if you keep cycling through that, you end up over time a little closer to where Jesus is calling us to be.
Amen. Amen. At this time, I know, can we just give our panelists a round of applause? A round of applause. I am so sorry, but we are out of time. I wish I had more time to give you, but we don't have that kind of time. So at this point in our program, I'm going to ask Dr. McCreary to come forth and close us out. And then I believe you have an announcement that you would like to make. Well,
I'd like to make an announcement as well.
Thank you very much. And the one thing that I have to apologize, that not including about the information about Lott Carey mission, its history. I thought that I didn't include in the brochure only information about our Underwood Center, was that probably our keynote speaker or during the panel session that will come up about the Lott Carey history. And the last year we had a wonderful time with the Latin American, the scholar we invited, along with the Indian and African and the Japanese missionary that make it the more global appearance. And then this year that we chose, the Lott Carey was born in 1780 in Virginia as a slave. But at his age, 28, whatever misinformation that you can correct me, but he purchased the freedom at his age 28, along with his daughters. And he prepared himself to be a missionary to Africa. So it is not known much in this American history, but there are already early 19th century, there are many black missionaries to Africa, to foreign land. And these information must be taught in the seminaries, globally. So in memory of Lott Carey mission that he died in Liberia in 1828, that made the American Baptist Church the centered, doesn't necessarily, but centered the Lott Carey mission founded in 1897. So its Lott Carey mission is already over a century-old mission and been working globally with so many the countries. However, it's not known too much to the public because the preconcept or misunderstanding about doing the missionary work in the last couple of centuries been in a wrong conception. So this year we are very privileged inviting the Lott Carey mission. And another information is he's the 3 panels and moderator has been our New Brunswick community around. So we decide this year that we want to make it Lott Carey mission year. So that we want to have a time to the relationship between New Brunswick Seminary and Lott Carey mission. So that how we New Brunswick community will learn from this century-old Lott Carey mission, so that we can how we develop in our very diverse and the multi-New Brunswick community will give the direction for our dedication to the global Christianity. So that was the main motivation. And then we have a more wonderful the subject that we will bring next year. So please just give us continuous support. And it will be a great year after year that our Global Christian Center will make a more the commitment and contribution to the global community. And would you give the one more, please? The last announcement is, unfortunately, our president and dean have the schedule, so have to leave. But fortunately, our keynote speaker will stay with us for more hours, because I had to. I will give you a ride to the train station, so he's my slave until 3 o'clock. So we will lunch, and we welcome anyone want to share his experience and insight over the lunch, especially our students from St. John's campus, that they will join the lunch. And anyone that you want to join, then we will have a great time.
I just wanted to announce that on October the 12th, which is next Friday, we're having a commissioning service for myself and Dr. Gina Stewart and all the other officers, Dr. Jesse Williams and others, in Hackensack at Mount Olive Church. That's next Friday night at 7 p.m. You are all invited. Dr. Goatley will be there. Dr. Jerry Sanders will be our preacher, and it'll be a wonderful, wonderful sending forth around the world of this new leadership. God bless you. You're welcome.
God, we thank you for this conversation around and about missions. We realize through our conversation that there are so many in this world who continue to be disenfranchised and marginalized, minimized, dehumanized in Asia, in Africa, in Europe, in the West Indies, in Africa, in America, in South America, North America, Russia, so many places. We pray that this conversation will equip us to see outside of ourselves, to realize and recognize that the myopic view we've come to this ministry with is far less than the view you gave us at birth. Help us to overcome the prejudices and the biases that have hindered, co-opted, and corrupted our ability to effectively minister. I ask, oh God, as elder of this community, that you breathe down a healing rain now, that we not see missions as our primary responsibility, but we recognize that you have called us to go into all the world. Yes, first in our Jerusalem, then into Samaria, but into all the world. Help us to be all world missionaries. Whether we come with a theology that is mainstream or one that is radical, those are human concerns. Move us past the human to the divine. Thank you for each person here. We're so into not being about programs, but being about people. Any injuries to relationship because of myopic view help us to see that we might reconnect the disconnect. Those who feel vilified or those who feel less than, help them to realize this is a community where we can all find a place and a space. Thank you for prophetic visioning. I speak it now upon this congregation, this population, this group of people, that you would do with us a work that will transform this world. Dismiss us now from this place, but never from your spirit. I ask that your face would shine upon us in such a way that we might see the smiles in each other. That you would light up our lives with your radiant presence. That our hearts would know after they are healed how blessed they were via these conversations. Order our steps, illuminate our pathway, but most of all, keep us humble and faithful. In Jesus' name, in Christ's name, in God's name, amen. Amen.